Now, I have the proud honor and privilege of bringing upon Andre Schneider. He is the chairman of the World Climate Foundation, and he's someone that has been with the organization for many, many years. He's shaped how the organization is catalyzing climate finance, creating climate and nature platforms around the world. So always excited to have you, Andre, and he's going to have a session that is based on the materials economy, decarbonizing plastics, glass, and beyond. Welcome, Andre.
May I just invite my very distinguished panel with Claudia Schäffer from Dow Chemical Company, Sonia Timia from Heineken, Andres Berganini, I hope I will get that one right until the end of the session, from Apparel Impact Institute, and last but not least, Professor Livio Scalvini from the Leonardo Center on Business for Society. Okay. I go to the other side. We have to create some diversity. At least we're almost balanced here. That's already not bad. Okay. Let me just give you a short intro. We've heard time over time that the COP30 is going to be the implementation COP, which demands delivery across the need to get real economy action in energy, finance, materials, and manufacturing. The material economy is often portrayed as difficult to abate sector, not because it's not possible, but there's typically very long supply chains involved and complex markets. And also, we will be talking about that, also circular economy, which are systems which have to be set up. But it presents some of the most immediate potentials for decarbonization by changing markets and their mechanisms through circularity, innovation, and smarter demand signals, and probably also on deconnecting some of the parts of the supply chain. The action agenda of COP30 looks at zero and low emission technology in hard-to-abate sectors. This really raises the question on how we can change to move more adaptive markets for downstream material decarbonization and adaptation of supply chains. Hence also allowing for impact monetization, because as we probably will all agree on this panel, change which doesn't economically make sense for companies will be very difficult to be implemented. Hence also allowing for, let us start with the example of decarbonization of plastics, but we will not only talk about plastics, which will give a first exemplification of such a market change by Professor Livio Scalvini of the Leonardo Center of the Imperial College in London, whose research spans academic, industry and system change levels and has been around the question how to create changes that generate positive impact and go beyond compliance, looking also on how research and cross-sector collaboration can catalyze change. Professor Scalvini, please.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and please, in general, call me Livio. Thank you also to the World Climate Foundation for this opportunity, and to all of you for being here to share some ideas and reflection on this macro challenge. And let's start from where we are. So we are here at COP in a, would say, delicate moment where we see, if you want, a polarization of trajectories within areas and companies that are stepping back, but many others that are moving forward. And we are moving from the notion of pledges. We're looking at performance. We are going beyond targets. We are talking about actions, transactions that are happening. We're talking about innovation, but we're also looking at scalability. So I think that there is a positive and negative here, and I'm more for the positive side. So maybe things are really going into real matters. But at the same time, what we have to look at is that we are looking at a go beyond the notion that sustainability is a cost. We are going beyond the notion of sustainability as an opportunity, and we are looking at really making impact something that can be measured, can be an asset, and can be monetized. If you get there, the narrative could change. And we decided to start in hard-to-abate sector, and in particular on the hardest-to-abate sector. We decided to start on the chemical sectors for a number of reasons, to do a study and understand how we can tackle this challenge. Well, first of all is because chemical sector accounts for 5% of global GDP, but more of carbon emissions, but most of all because it feeds 95% of all the other industries. So I would say that everything that we have around us, whether it is a shoe or a clothes, or if it is a car or a computer or a furniture or anything, has some plastics and chemicals inside. So the point is that there are very long value chains with a small number of molecules, but very hard to be tracked because it goes everywhere at all time. So that's the first point. The second is that decarbonizing chemicals is highly expensive. So it takes a lot of investments upstream, and the end user is very far. So there are maybe 5, 7 steps with the end user. So it's hard for those that have the willingness to pay to recognize the value upstream. So that is a way where we have to think differently of the monetization and the creation of a market that can enable this change. So we see this as a competitive advantage for the subjects, the companies, the players that are joining this effort, because they will learn, they will build new models that will create value. And for this purpose, we have launched a couple of years ago a group at Imperial College, a cross-disciplinary group that tackles multiple capabilities from chemicals to process system engineering, environmental policy, blockchain, finance. You need to have all these capabilities to tackle, to address all these enabling steps. Here is the report. I encourage you to download it and read it and provide us feedback on your ideas. But most of all, it's a result of a collaborative effort with industry players, from chemical companies to now brands to financial institutions, markets, market platforms that are needed to understand if it is work or not. And it tackles fundamental 3 questions. The first is the why. So is there a business case or not to do it? The second is on the what, so how a market model could work. And the third fundamental question is how to make it happen. So what is the roadmap that could allow us to build a real market for this transition? So let's start with the fundamental question of the business case. Is there a business case? Well, the answer is that there are a number of reasons that can help address these points. And the first one is, of course, alignment with policy frameworks, CBAM, CSRD, Omnibus. Now, these are, if you want, compliance factors that are needed but are not enough. The second point is market pressure and brand. So it's the pressure from the end consumers, it's the pressure from investors, but most of all is a financial performance. So the companies that are able really to decarbonize their business model outperforms in terms of growth, outperforms in terms of margins. And the data are showing us that the margins that can be generated in the core sectors that are using plastics can vary from, let's say, 5 to 20%. It varies a lot also according to the corporate strategies of the companies, but that's a fact. And the cost to decarbonize the products that on average weighs 6% of the products of a shoe or anything, it's marginal. It's like 0.3%. So the business case is a no-brainer. It's a multiples of the cost for the downstream players. but at the same time, it is an enabler for upstream companies to do the investments that are needed. So, business case is one point. The second is what is now the market that we're talking about? Well, it is based on the concept of environmental attributes that are generating by decoupling the physical molecule with digital certificates. So it means that chemical companies upstream produce decarbonized molecules and sell the product inside the value chain, maybe 5, 7 steps in the value chain. And the downstream player, so let's say a plastic producer or a fashion brand, can buy the environmental attributes and claim that the product is fully decarbonized in terms of plastic. So there are some principles that have to be, of course, addressed in terms of transparency. So I have open register to certify that. In terms of verification, so with blockchains, platforms, that enable to ensure that these are, there is no double counting. In terms of course, alignment with policies and in terms of governance frameworks. So the market model is robust and is being already tested in other sectors like aviation, for example, itself. But let's look at also at the how, so at the roadmap, because we're talking about a completely new framework, and so we're looking at something that has to be set up quickly and tested in terms of validity in order to have the protocols that allow these interventions to happen. Secondly, is about really building the infrastructure that are needed to create the liquidity that can scale. The market opportunity is big. If you're looking at just at Europe, it's 12% of the global market, and the total addressable market is like 120 billion. So the point is really looking at the supply side. And so far, the supply side is just less than 1% of the total addressable market. So we are looking at a massive opportunity to introduce new technologies, to do massive investment upstream, and to create the demand that we need for the future, and to create a blueprint for impact markets. So this is what we are aiming at. This is a coalition and a market that has to be created by the companies that are here in this room and the like-minded people that are sharing this vision. So thank you, and invite you to join this conversation.
Thank you, Livio, very much for this introduction. Clearly, this needs, if we talk about plastics, a two-pronged approach. There needs to be also circular economy, but as we will not be totally able to recuperate everything, we will also need to decarbonize plastic directly. Let me just continue now. And sorry if I don't use exactly the same order, but I think we want to bring a little bit some diversity. So, Sonia, packaging is the most visible part of the materials challenge. We did it here also with the plastic side, but how is Heineken embedding circular design and recycled content procurement into its business operations, and what market or policy levels could most advance change among the beverage CPG sectors overall?
Thank you, Andre, and hello all. Lovely to be part of the conversation today. So packaging is very much a cornerstone of our circularity strategy. And as you say, Andre, part of it's because of its visibility. It's what our consumers connect with before they drink our products. But it's also the area where we see the most material impact, as well as opportunity. So our strategy has 3 levels to it. The first is to increase reuse. The second is around recycled content, and the third is around recyclable by design. So on reuse, we have a goal for 43% of our volumes to come from reusable formats by 2030. And we're at about 39% at the moment. In the same time frame, we also have a goal to have 50% recycled content in all our bottles and cans globally, and we're currently at about 44%. And finally, we also want 99% or more of our packaging to be recycled by design. So 3 super concrete goals, and then it comes to the question you asked about how we're embedding this in our design and our operations, and there's a couple of levers that we use. Firstly, we really have circularity by design as early in the process as we possibly can. So what does this mean in tangible ways? So if you think about the aluminium can that we use, we think very carefully about how do we design for recyclability. So part of it is, I'm going to get super techie now, bear with me, but we could use one alloy, a uni alloy in both the body of the can as well as at the ends. And this helps with material purity when it comes to the different waste streams. We can also require higher recycled content at the ends as well as the body. What you find is the body already has it, the ends don't. So these are nudges that we can have from a design perspective, but we can also bring some of our marketing flavor to it by having information on pack to really raise awareness with our consumers. But how do you recycle? What are the right collection points, etc.? So that's one way. You also mentioned procurement. So on procurement, we engage with our suppliers to really, firstly, ask them to decarbonize, do this through efficiency, moving to renewables, and now we're starting to integrate that into contract clauses as well to make it real. And when it comes to the material side, we're starting to include requirements around material traceability as well as minimum thresholds for recycled content. So yeah, those are a couple of ways that we're integrating into our operations as well as thinking about procurement. And then you asked a question in terms of what market-based and policy mechanisms will help us. So let me start with policy. On the policy side, we are very supportive of regulations that help us drive circularity. In the EU, we've got the packaging waste regulations, which have targets for countries in terms of reuse and recycled content, which we are really supportive of. We also have lots of acronyms, the EPR, so Extended Producer Responsibility, and DRS, which is a deposit return schemes. And those also help drive circularity in terms of bringing the packaging back to us. And actually with EPR, we're really a fan for where you have eco-modulated fees, which means that you get incentivized for better recyclability and more recycled content. And on the market side, we invest in collection schemes, and we co-invest in some of them. So right here in Brazil, one of the things our Heineken business does locally is we have 9 collection hubs for glass. Now, glass is devilishly hard to collect. Aluminium, because of its value, is much easier, but glass, it breaks, it doesn't have the value. So by establishing these collection hubs, and from a market perspective, having relationships with our suppliers to make sure that glass cullets actually go to them, it means we can bring the glass back into our bottles again. And I think across all of this, what's really important is collaboration. We cannot drive circularity on our own. It's just not going to work. We are just one cog in the wheel when it comes to reuse. We have to work with the retailers, logistics, a lot of different parts of the chain to make sure it works, and the same across the piece. So I think that's the wrapper for me in terms of how we drive circularity. And it's not easy to do, but it's something that we absolutely have to do to close the loop, but also as a huge part of helping us decarbonize as well.
Dear Sonia, thank you very much. I mean, it was very clear. And I think that also what you raised at the end, we need more industry-wide collaborations to actually look at those things, how we can improve also the providers and the end users. And that's also one thing we're doing here at the World Climate Foundation with our coalitions. And I think we hope that we can pursue on that one, because I think there are many domains which are not competitive, but which are very important for us all. And so it might be very helpful if we can put actually together the pressure on it. Now I will go on. Thank you. Andres, the clothing industry has one of the most challenging material and clean energy transitions. We did actually hear several presentations already over the last 2 days. Complicated supply chains and growing attention on textile waste. What specific insights from the Apparel Impact Institute's programs shed light on how this industry, how industry coalitions can achieve measurable reductions in material emissions and resource utilization?
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea, and first of all, to react so many common grounds with Sonia's interventions, and in the interest of not being redundant, I'll take the angle of not-for-profit. So Apparel Impact Institute, or AII, is a global not-for-profit that identifies, funds, scales, and measures proven solutions at a factory level to decarbonize the fashion supply chain. So in essence, we're an industry convener. We convene solution providers into a solutions portfolio. Our brand partners, our supplier partners enroll in these programs, get engineers inside of their factories and achieve their science-based targets. But we're also conveners of funds and funders in the form, right at the center, of a philanthropic fashion climate fund that we're currently deploying. I think we're over $156 million being deployed in the decarbonization levers of our industry. So 8% of the global CO2 emissions are often attributed to the textile industry, depending on the scope of and intersections with other sectors. 55% of in a garment's journey of production are concentrated in a manufacturer where the material processing happens. That's energy intense, carbon intense, materials intense, chemicals intense. So naturally, that's where we focused more of our solutions and funds. Our last report, which we map the 20% of factories that represent over 80% of the global emissions, our latest reading has shown a first year-on-year increase of 7.5% CO2 emissions of the industry. This is alarming because we also see so many brands enrolled in submitting in science-based targets, but we're already 5 years in the decade of action and there's a lot of targets set but low implementation. So very aligned with the COP implementation theme, and that's central to our strategy because barriers to implementation are access to solutions and access to finance. So, and the last thing I'll say to kind of put an example that relates to materials economy and decarbonizing is if you look at the journey of decarbonization of a factory, a wet processing factory that has weaving, dyeing in its processes, many of our brands, I'd say most of our brands, are already enrolling their key suppliers in efficiency and optimization. Of course, water saved, carbon saved is money saved. In 13 months after doing tweaks at these factories, they're getting a return over investment. Now they're realizing that, probably they realized this before, but now they're trying to look at how they make budgets fit, that their 2030 targets are not going to be achieved only by efficiency and optimization in these types of factories. So now we're looking at higher impact projects like renewable energy coupled with a full electrification of a factory with some steam heat pumps that recirculate the heat. And this is pricier. This does not have an ROI in 13 months. So this is where being an industry convener is strategic because Brand A already started doing some efficiency work with this supplier, but we have the visibility of the global database to then bring Brand B and Brand C, who also are customers of this supplier, that can co-invest and make a business case of co-investment and share the story, share the results. Sometimes brands B and C have no clue that this supplier was already doing some great stuff with another brand because they compete in the market. But now we're seeing great examples of business cases of just a transparent and a collective approach of brands that compete in the high street, but are looking at a transparent and collective approach to investing. And even then, sometimes their budgets are not enough to fund the entire renewable transition of their full strategic supplier base. So that's where our fund comes in. For every dollar that we get from a private sector or brand in a strong climate program, we will put another one and another one. And this is a way of using philanthropy to catalyze, and we're getting more and more private sector funds by proving and de-risking these higher impact projects. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. We can see collaboration is really a key element and probably learning from each other and going forward. Now, Claudia, as a top chemical company, Dow is always searching for ways to innovate materials. In what ways are you or Dow using technologies and business practices such as advanced recycling, renewable feedstock to lower carbon intensity while increasing transparency up and down the value chain?
Thank you. So good afternoon, boa tarde. I would like to start by talking who is the chemical industry, right? And if you think that chemicals are present in more than 90% of all manufacturing goods, so we are part of the solution in a low-carbon world. And we have a responsibility, we have a scale, and we want to make the difference. Besides low-carbon plastics, there are many other solutions that I wanted just to give some examples, like fluids and fumes we use in solar generation. We also have sealants and insulation materials that we use in buildings to make them more efficient. So the good news is that this is an opportunity because people are looking for more sustainable materials. So it's all about matching material science to those needs. And you are talking about actions. So I wanted to talk about some examples of what we are doing to make this change. The first example is related to investing in low-carbon technology. So we are investing in a petrochemical complex in Canada to produce net zero, scope 1 and 2 plastics. So developing all the technology and the ecosystem and the business models, as you said, to make this feasible. That means low carbon products for our customers, right? Because they have their targets. And we can do that and you have the same quality, which is very important. Second is circularity, where we are participating in all of the ecosystems you mentioned, and this is very complex, but developing mechanical and advanced recycling and bio-based materials. Think about what will happen in terms of supply-demand. So we do see that there is going to be more demand than supply, and all those investments take time. So what do you do to really accelerate value chain decarbonization and mobilize financing, because we need to do it affordably? So it's very simple. We need three things. We need a customer willing to buy low-carbon products and giving a demand signal to the market. We need suppliers, our suppliers I'm talking, not we, that want to sell us low-carbon feedstocks and raw materials. And we need a pragmatic carbon accounting, because the current way to calculate environmental attributes, product carbon footprints, they need to be market-based, so you can link demand and supply. So very simple, just three things. And collaboration across the value chain is all about suppliers and customers.
Thank you very much. I mean, that just has me think a little bit. We have still too many mechanisms which are actually based on conformity, in reliance to laws and be compliant. And we don't think enough about whether they actually generate impact, because that's what at the end counts. So, Livio, thank you for your introduction, showing a model, but if you look at what you're doing at the Imperial College, the Leonardo Center, what can you see of what you are looking at, what you're working with, can be translated in other domains? Because we see we need to rethink business models, we need to rethink supply chains, we probably need to rethink also how we can simplify circular economy, because otherwise we will not get at the speed of scale we need. So what do you see on those things from the research you're doing, and where we could apply ideas like you have presented for decarbonizing plastics to other domains? Microphone. You have one beside you on the other side.
Well, I believe that all these transitions require a vision on how sectors can evolve. And so it's a mix. When you're transitioning, there is not a leapfrog, whatever you're tackling. So with examples that we made on chemicals previously, on one hand, you have to decarbonize and monetize, find a market model to monetize it, and you have to combine at the same time circularity in order to more efficiently recover what you have in your pipeline. And you need also to have a long-term solutions in terms of going beyond, having biomaterials that can overcome all the limitations. So overall, this framework, on one hand, really have an ecosystem approach, and they are all facing a strong distance between where the investment is needed and where the returns are available. So it's really about having a transparent way to measure and reallocate the resources where the impact is generated. So this notion of transformative, collaborative transition requires, I would say, also a different, I would say, perspective on where the growth will emerge and how you need to work with others. but also a different mindset inside the companies and inside the leaders, because it's about unlearning and relearning what we have done in the past, because we're tackling different boundaries, different objectives. So I believe that these are examples, each of the industry can have an example of a trajectory. But here the effort is really about learning and shortening the learning curve, and if you want to building platforms that can be applied in other domains. So in other auto-based sector, I would say it's easier, because if you apply the same rules, we have to standardize the protocols, leverage existing platforms or on cement, on steel, on glass, on other materials. And of course, there is a lot to apply in this space. Because we need to be ready also to apply in other contexts that are much harder. Because, for example, we are starting to be mature also with biodiversity. The conversation have improved massively also vis-a-vis 2 years ago on biodiversity. We have a number of technology and capabilities that we are applying in this context. Because there are other challenges that are much tougher. So if you're looking at health or social impact, here is where we are at ground zero, especially on social impact. I think ground zero means that we don't have the metrics, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the platforms, the market. So shortening the learning curve, working together inside the sector, expanding platforms, methodologies, resources in others that are close, but also built for the future is going to be the challenge that we are all facing. And I think it's going to be a fascinating journey, because once you start it, then you don't see problems, you see only opportunities, you see massive opportunities. When we're talking about impact, I think it's about unlocking unlimited opportunities to create a regenerative society. And you change the narrative, then profits as a consequence. And we have to shift the order in terms of impact as a priority and the profit as a consequence of the fact that you're really creating and sharing value. So I think it's really a fascinating story for all of us.
Thank you very much. I think this is really a call, like we have already heard from many of you, a call for building alliances, coalitions, collaborate, exchange. And I think the biggest challenge will be ready to rethink your business models, because I think that will be the important part, because without that, we will all have troubles, and I've been CEO myself, to convince our boards to go somewhere where we're just going to lose money. But nevertheless, this is the COP, the action COP. We want to generate action. So I want to just go around with you with just some short pointer from you. What do you believe are you doing in your domain, in your company, in your sector, to actually contribute in a strong way that we can already talk at COP31 that we actually have reached a regenerative economy in our domains? And I will start this time with Claudia. Yes.
Well, you said collaboration. Collaboration is the key. So we are already collaborating with suppliers and with customers to prove that we can use market-based mechanisms credibly. One example, we closed a very large deal with a consumer goods company, a big company, and this is for low-carbon products, a 10-year agreement where we already started, actually, this October, to ship low-carbon products, and we reduced several millions of greenhouse gas emissions. And I would like to close by, we need to continue to press forward, we need to develop technologies, we need investments, we need market-based mechanisms. With that, we will make a change.
Thank you. Strong message. I will continue with Andres.
Sure. Building on the same collaborative attitude, I'd say yes, collective action, but always remarking the importance of putting that supplier, what happens on the ground, in the center. You've seen an example of transparency with brands that compete working with their shared suppliers, which is what I shared earlier, but also understanding what exactly does that manufacturer need. Now embarking in a 5-year project on electrification and waste management and next generation materials, sometimes they just don't really want just a loan for that project. Sometimes they want a longer-term purchasing agreement from these customer brands. Sometimes it's an incentive-based approach and not just a transaction. So it's collective action, but very, very conscious of what the suppliers actually need to overcome the barriers of implementation. And of course, the role of a government that provides the policy and infrastructure for grids, and ultimately they'll be getting the industry wins with this type of progress. So it's collective approach with the supplier in the heart.
Thank you. Sonia?
Thank you. Can I just say, Claudia, if you're talking about the partnership, I think you are. I think it's awesome, really awesome, and would love to find out more afterwards. If I look forward to a year, I think we need to be realistic as well. We're not going to solve all the problems in that time period. So what I would love for us to do is set the foundations to accelerate delivery in a collective way, because I very much agree with you. For me, collaboration is the key. And if I just use one example for what do I mean by that? So from a materials perspective, one of the shifts we want to make is moving from one-way bottles to reusable. Bottles that we can use again and again and again. It's good for carbon. It reduces it by a factor of about 6. It's good for profit. And what you said before is very true. The business case is really important. So we're buying less bottles, so we're more profitable as we do it. So what I would really like is that we set the foundations for delivery in a pragmatic way. We go for those actions, and we don't let perfection get in the way of progress. We need to push on in terms of what we can actually achieve and do it in a cost-effective way, because the finances will dictate it, and look for financing to bridge the gap where we need to.
Thank you. Livio, what will you help us doing in order to get there?
Well, first of all, we would like to create coalitions to implement this roadmap that I mentioned. But beyond that, I think that there is another strong message that I'm happy to share, is that in another research activities that we have developed recently, what comes out from a massive data set on corporate sustainability behaviors is that the companies that are doing transformative actions, that are serious on transformation, outperform on stock markets, so they create alpha, but also in accounting terms, they have more growth, more revenues, more profit. And on the other hand, those that are just doing greenwashing underperform. So this is a massive message for investors, because of course it will enable a massive reallocation on financial resources on the companies that are serious, and that will push companies to accelerate their transition. So the resources will come from multiple dimensions, from the market in terms of growth, from investors in terms of expectation, in terms of the people that you will attract, because the smartest people will be those that will share a vision that is more positive than just doing profit. So I'm really positive on the sense of being able to scale at large. We're talking about just 2 numbers, just to close. We are talking about 5 trillion, 7 trillion of SDG gaps across the different areas. And we are talking about 120 trillions in terms of GDP, but there are 560 trillion of financial resources. So it's 5 times GDP and 100 times what is the gap. So shifting small amount in asset allocation can really not just cover the gap, but provide resources not just to reduce the damage, but to move into near net positive. We're not talking about monetizing impact. This is just shifting the attention and reducing the damage. The opportunities are still ahead, so I'm positive about that.
Thank you very much, and I think there's a signal to all the investors and in the room here. It really pays out well to invest in companies who take those initiatives like these here present. And we're getting slowly to the end. And I just want to quickly have a go around. We actually had a discussion before we started here. And I would like to ask each of you in a short sentence to say, what do we expect coming out of this COP here? In view of your companies, of what you have to do, as someone said, we will not solve all the problems, but I think it's also important that we create the right attention, the right pressure, the right, speed, also to governments to actually go the right way. So who wants to start? So the others who want a little bit think more can have a little bit more.
Can I have 2 sentences? Because I'm struggling to think of one, which is really tough. And the reason I asked for 2 is my one sentence of what we come to COP for as business is the connections, the conversations like the ones that we have now to learn from each other, but then to carry that message forward to how we can partner. So from a business perspective, I think that's something that we take away from COP. On the policy front, which is what the COP is about in terms of the negotiating chamber, that's a little bit more complicated. But what we hope for from a business perspective is stability and certainty. We want to see the right signals that the NDCs are going in the right direction to incentivize decarbonisation, because as business, we can go far, but very frankly, we're not going to reach our goals unless we have the governments moving as well. So that's what I'm looking for, stability, certainty in policy with NDCs that are ambitious.
Excellent. Andres?
Well, yes, ×2. And AII is a supporting organization of the UNFCCC Fashion Charter, and they've released this year's communiqué for COP30 again. And if you look at the communiques of the last 5 years and 5 COPs, it's very similar. We just need to address barriers of implementation now, because the communiques say we have the solutions and we have the money. Now it's about addressing the barriers to get those solutions on factories. So that's my takeaway.
Great. Claudia?
I think we are business, as we're seeing. So we are hearing what the governments are discussing and expecting for the best. But what we can do here is really connections. We talked about it. I think we are a good example, right? That connections really help. And really is about discussing ecosystems, discussing new business models, because this will help us after COP to really start implementing, right?
Thank you. And Livio, we're already overrunning, so you have a short version.
I'll be super short. I tend to talk too much, so it'll be super short. No, I think that we are entering a phase of maturity of this transition, where the balance is shifting from policy to business and coalition, because the case is there. We need to walk faster, and the smarter will be those that will emerge. So it's a massive opportunity for those that are leading and paving the way.
Thank you very much to this great panel. A big round of applause to these great contributions.